Hi, my name is Holly Lacey, and welcome to our Kind Community Conversation. My role in the district is as the Vice Principal of Pocatello High School, and I am going to give these lovely panel members a chance today to be able to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about what they do, and then we'll jump right in.
Sure. Start over here. I'm Kyle Hansen. I am the CANS program manager. The CANS is the Child Adolescent Needs and Strengths. So it's a tool that Idaho uses to monitor how we're doing in the behavioral health system. I'm a counselor by training, and I'm really excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Kendra Westerhouse. I am a psychologist who works with children, adolescents, and their families at Health West. I also serve as the pediatric and child team lead there, and I love working with kids and helping them in any way I can.
I'm Amy Prescott. I'm the principal at New Horizon High School, our alternative school here in town, and I've been there for 8 years. It's a great place. I love working with our at-risk youth, and
I'm Todd Mauger. I'm the Chief Juvenile Probation Officer at Bannock County Juvenile Justice. I also oversee the Intake and Diversion Unit. And recently we moved that unit into what we call the Village, which is a Safe Teen Assessment Center.
I got one. I'm Judge Call. I lost my first name about a year ago when I took the bench. And I take care of all of the child protection and juvenile justice cases for Bannock County. When Judge Murray retired, I was appointed to replace him and have been doing it for a little over a year now.
I'm Victoria Bird, and I'm just beside myself that I'm sitting here with such amazing people. I am the executive director for a nonprofit that my husband and I run called Hope Rides. We promote mental health and physical fitness and authentic connections.
So tonight we have some questions that we will work our way through. I have encouraged our panel members to jump in at any time and to fill in the gaps and provide more information as needed. If there's anybody in the audience that would like to ask a question as we're going through, please feel free to just raise your hand and we will get you in the moment so that we can have a live conversation tonight, okay? So I will start with our honorable judge. And I'm going to ask him the first question, and then we'll start our conversation from there. Our first question is, what types of problems or behavioral issues normally bring a child into the juvenile system?
There's a lot of different things that could bring a child to us in the juvenile court. Todd here has some data for us on our types of charges that we've had, at least as of last year, 2022, and the ones that hit the greatest percentages included status offenses, which I can break down a little more for you in a minute. We had quite a few tobacco cases. That would include things like vaping. Quite a few misdemeanor property damage type cases, some misdemeanor drugs, so that'd be like marijuana or paraphernalia. We have quite a few cases when it comes to misdemeanor crimes against persons. That'd be things like batteries. Also connected with that are nuisance crimes, so that'd be something like disturbing the peace charges, those kinds of things. Those tend to be the ones that cover the most volume of our cases, and then we have a smattering of all kinds of other cases in there. We have quite a few kids that come to court also, and they're identified in here in one of these offenses as well, various types of offenses. I guess sexting is probably the easiest way to describe it, but a lot of text messaging, inappropriate pictures, that kind of thing that get kids brought into court, and they didn't realize, although we tell them a lot, they didn't realize that was going to bring them. So those tend to be a lot of the things that bring kids into the juvenile system, or at least those are the charges. There's a lot of underlying root causes and reasons for why they get involved in those kinds of things or have those things happening. But that kind of sums that up. Anything to add to that, Todd? Oh, I guess I can break down the status offenses we deal with. Truancies is the biggest portion of what we do, so kids not attending school regularly. Curfew would be the next highest number of status offenses that would bring kids into court.
Thank you. Is there anything that you would like to add to that, Todd?
I think, as the Intake and Diversion Unit Supervisor, when you look at what, the federal government how they categorize status offenses. And I don't know if everybody knows, but a status offense is really an offense that if an adult does, no one cares. Your truancy, runaway, beyond parental control, and curfews. But when you look at that, almost, over the last, I'm just looking for the last 5 years, 22% of those cases represent all the cases that we see in juvenile court. But status offenses are also categorized as those offenses that they're not necessarily criminal, but they're indicating some type of dysfunction within that use, home or environment, and if not, if left untreated or we don't address those issues, they do escalate into more criminal type offenses. And so when you look at juvenile justice in Bannock County, I think that's one of the strengths we have is we focus on those lower risk offenses and try to create some type of prevention, put some prevention in place so that they don't escalate to the criminal type behaviors.
I'd like us to speak a little bit on the mental health aspect and how that cooperates with, the juvenile justice system. But Amy, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about the school system and how we are working with juvenile justice.
That's a big question. So we do a lot with juvenile justice. I think I have probation officers in my schools visiting probably 3 or 4 days of the week, and it's probably this similar in other schools. They come in, they're preventative, they're proactive for kids. They're really a support. I know a lot of parents and community members think that, I don't want my kid in the system, they say, but it really is seen as us by a support. And we all work together. So we have crossover meetings where we help our kids that are in foster care and on probation. We have Rule 16s, Rule 19s. We work together in a lot of ways. We have a classroom at YDC, which is the Youth Development Center. It's in the old jail behind the adult courthouse. It's under New Horizon, and so the students that attend there earn credit through New Horizon. But it's a classroom that has high structure, high supervision, supervised by probation, a classroom teacher that is district. So we have a great partnership. I think that's probably a strength in our region that a lot of other regions don't maybe have that great of a working relationship.
Thank you. For the 3 that haven't gotten to speak yet, I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about how you interact with the juvenile justice system and with the schools as well.
All right. Well, health and welfare is going through a lot of changes, but historically, our team at Children's Mental Health has worked a lot with juvenile justice and the schools. The same kids that have high needs in mental health show up there and need help being addressed. So we do a lot of risk assessment and getting people referred to the right treatment that they need. So, and I'll just echo what Amy said. I used to work in a different region of the state, and it was amazing to come back to Pocatello, where I did graduate school, and experience wow, people actually enjoy working together here. We don't argue about whose job it is to help. Everybody just genuinely gets involved and tries to make a difference. So that's something that I love about our community.
Yeah, I think I'm going to piggyback off of what some other people have said, including Todd really hit on the kind of systems involvement, right? And I'm not talking justice system, that's one system, but family system, school system, community. These kids that have these offenses, maybe status offenses, a lot of times those are a symptom of something else, right? And so what we want to do is get them as plugged in as we can to as many services as will be helpful. A lot of times that is counseling, whether it's individual or family counseling that we engage them in. And so it's really helpful if we can say, okay, I see there's this one symptom here. I don't know that we've identified the cause. What can we do to help find that, and what can we do to help alleviate that? One of the things that we do at Health West is we have a partnership with School District 25, and it's awesome. And you know. And so we have our counselors embedded into some of the schools as a Health West clinic. What's really great there is that we remove any barriers the parents have getting the kids to their appointments. And so it's really nice to be able to do that. I think we have a broader reach when we do that. I think we're able to get some of those higher risk kids who maybe don't have the resources to get to a traditional counseling office. So I think we're helping kind of divert kids out of juvenile justice by providing as many services as we can and removing barriers.
So, our role with Stronger Than, I think, is a little bit different maybe than some of the others. So we have been into New Horizon. We've been into other schools in the district. We love going to Franklin every year. And what we do is we bring kids together in large groups. We're usually in either a PE class or a health class. And we just have a good conversation with kids about what mental health looks like. We spend a lot of time identifying emotions, and then we try to talk about healthy ways of dealing with those emotions, whether they're on the positive end of things or the negative end of things. Because a lot of times kids, as much as we talk a lot about what we do when we're sad and what we do when we're angry, sometimes we forget to talk about what we do when things are good, and how we can promote having those positive experiences with others. So our role is just to support the things that are already happening in a very system structure. And we just feel so blessed to be a part of a community that looks outside of the box for solutions to problems that, like Amy said, they're very complex questions and very hard problems, and it takes a community.
To piggyback off of that, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the 3 core intentions of Stronger Than, and then the role that they play in interconnecting.
Yeah, you bet. So our core intentions are to promote mental health, physical fitness, and authentic connections. And we have found, or why those are our core connections, is because we are always looking to start conversations about suicide awareness and suicide prevention. And the key contributors that have been found for preventing suicide is helping people understand that everybody is lovable, that there's no problem that's unsolvable, and that there's no emotion that lasts forever. And we do that in a little bit different way. We try to get kids up and moving and active, so that they're connecting with their minds and their bodies. We talk about emotions and how those play out in our bodies. And then we try to get them talking with each other and forming those authentic connections. A lot of times mental illness can be very isolating, and they can feel very alone. But bringing those conversations and getting them involved in something where they're doing something physically active, there's all the brain things that happen that form those connections, and they're very authentic and they're very real. And so getting them connected through a shared experience, so that when they are going through a hard time, they feel like they have somebody that they can talk to, whether that's a classmate or a teacher that is involved, or going home and talking to a trusted adult or parent.
Thank you. Amy, is there anything that you can share from when you've had Stronger Than into your building? Any of the experiences?
It's been a little bit. No, it's great. Kids love the connection. Kids love any connection. Sometimes they seek for the wrong connections. They even can like negative attention at times, but it brings positive attention and just awareness to those things that we typically don't think about. I mean, we address all of those things in school, but it's not the forefront in math class or in English class. And so it's nice to bring those really important issues to light and then have kids engage in it.
In a fun way.
Mm-hmm. They have a blast.
I know when I've been and sat through, some of the court trainings and been a part of that, a lot of the times I've heard Todd and our judge ask, what positive things are you doing inside of your schools? And I'm wondering if you guys can talk a little bit about some of the ways that you encourage our learners in our district to get involved.
By you guys, you mean me and Todd?
Yeah.
All right. I thought so, but I didn't want to be presumptuous. One of the things that we do, and this is kind of just based generally through our juvenile justice model, and what the probation department does with the kids, is we try to involve them in what we call pro-social activities. That's the phrase that we use for it. Whether that's being engaged in some type of school sport or club or music program. Sometimes that can even be some type of positive employment opportunity that the kids have. Something like that gets them connected with their community, and seeing success in what they're doing. I shared a story when I came and spoke to the K through 12 principals at the beginning of the year here a little bit about one particular kid who will remain nameless because I can't talk about that outside of court. But I had seen him come back over and over and over again almost every other week at least with probation violations and issues at home and behavior problems, new charges, all kinds of things. And the parents were struggling to figure out how to help this kid. I was struggling, probation was struggling, and we just were really having a difficult time. Well, all of a sudden, the kid stopped showing up to our court, and it was because, I think, that child had started participating in their school's football team. And I'd seen them out at their practices, and they were engaging out there and participating in those activities, and seemed to have found a connection with their community, somewhere where they belonged, somewhere where they found friends who were encouraging them to do good things. Now, it doesn't mean every kid on the football team is always going to make every right decision. I've got a kid on a football team, and he does not always make every right decision. He makes a lot of good ones, but they're kids. But I have seen that, and this is not an isolated incident. I've seen it with multiple kids. When they find a connection, whether it's through the band or through the drama club or some other type of organization, a lot of times through the school, because that's where they spend a lot of their time and have most of their connection. They find these positive connections, and they really start to succeed and to thrive when they find that belonging. So I think it's so important that we have those opportunities for our kids and that we make those places safe places where those kids can feel challenged to succeed and to excel at what they do, but also feel like they belong, like they're part of that community. And that their mentors, their coaches, their friends are always encouraging them to do better and to participate. And I have seen that work with kids better than I think anything else.
Yeah, as you talk about belonging, youth need to belong to something, and they seek to belong to something. If we don't provide positive things to belong to and be part of, they find their own, and a lot of times it's negative, and it's not a good situation. I'm thinking back to our youth level of service inventory that we conduct with each case that comes in to juvenile justice. And one of the areas on that assessment and basically it's like assessing a risk to reoffend, one of the areas is leisure and recreation. And with every kid, even the low-risk kids, we have that's one of the areas that always is in the high category. And so I think as we talk about this, it's important to understand that it's probably a gap we have right now, getting kids to belong to something, getting pro-social activities. So Victoria's program, I'm thinking about how we could incorporate that into what I'm doing over at the Village right now. But I'll give you an example. We had over the last 10 years, I've worked real close with Pocatello Parks and Recreation to do summer community service programs. And it was probably 3 or 4 years ago. Well, it's more than that. It was when we replaced all the bridges on City Creek. If anybody's ever hiked up City Creek, if you remember back maybe 10, 15 years ago, all the bridges were torn out and they were replaced with new bridges. Well, we had a group of kids that summer that were court-ordered community service, and we were tasked with building the forms at the Parks and Rec department for the cement, and then hiking the boulders up the trail for, we were skinning the edges of the bridges, and then we were packing the concrete in, mixing it, pouring the concrete. We did, I think over 2 years, we did all 18 bridges. But these kids were only ordered 20 hours of community service. And after, the first day they come out, it's kind of shell shock, right? They're not used to working. They're a little dehydrated. They think they're going to die. But after about the fourth day, this group of 6 or 7 kids, a group of 6 or 7 kids had completed their community service, so they didn't have any more service to do. And that Wednesday morning, I go to the building about an hour early, and 5 of the kids that had completed their community service are sitting on the sidewalk. I'm like, hey, what are you guys doing here? You finished up last week. And they're like, well, we just thought we better keep working till this job's done. They they got a sense of belonging as they were building those bridges. Mountain bikers, hikers would come by, tell them thank you, keep up the good work, we appreciate it, you're helping our community. And those kids, you know, they completed maybe 150 hours of community service that summer because they were helping out and they belonged to something. So I think as we move forward, that it's really important for us to, you know, find those things that kids can belong to, because who would have thought carrying boulders up City Creek in a wheelbarrow 2 miles and concrete bags and would be something that they would want to keep doing after they were done, but it was that sense of belonging.
Can I talk about this topic for a minute? Okay.
Please do.
This is my soapbox. I've already talked about it for a few hours today earlier, so I'll try and keep it to just a few minutes, I promise. But I'm really passionate about strengths. So I mentioned child adolescent needs and strengths is the assessment tool that I'm training people on. And we have Idaho data that illustrates when kids build strengths, their needs go way down. Like they come into treatment because they have needs, they get out of treatment because we help them build strengths. And so those stories just illustrate exactly what we're seeing in the data. And we've actually done work the last few years to increase the number of youth building some of the strengths. So we found that there's 6 key strengths, and we have an acronym to help us remember, PC FIRE. So person-centered planning. If you want to light it on fire, remember PC FIRE. So P stands for peer influences. F is for family. Oh, I got ahead of myself.
Yeah.
I put the pressure on myself by saying it, so don't worry. C is coping and savoring. F is for family. I is interpersonal. R is resilience, and E is educational setting. So those 6 areas are where we really need to help youth build those strengths. And when we do, it's amazing. There's data. If you want to go see it, you're probably not as nerdy as I am, but it's on the Idaho TCOM Institute website. And then if you scroll all the way down, there's a CANS Learning Collaborative link, and there's a Hall of Fame. So we created a bunch of, well, I didn't create the stories, they actually happened, but people submitted stories of what they did to help youth build those different strengths, and they sound a lot like what we just heard. So I find it really inspiring to listen and read and hear those stories. If you want to go check out the Hall of Fame or submit a story, there's a link on that website. And I'm just so passionate, and I'm glad that we talked about strengths, and it just came out naturally because that's what our youth need. They don't need to talk about everything that's wrong with them all the time. So many of them feel like they're labeled and they're a problem, and what we have to do is help them believe in themselves and have some things that they like about themselves by building strengths. So thanks for listening to my soapbox.
Kendra, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the assessment you use and some of the gaps that you see and the needs that you fill in through that assessment.
Yeah, so part of my job is to do assessments, and there's kind of 2 broad categories these fall into. One is kind of psychological testing assessments, where we are more, there's concerns, and we're trying to figure out what the source is and then give some intervention recommendations. So a lot of those are if the kids are struggling in school, we're trying to figure out if it's because of an emotional concern or ADHD or a learning disability or anything like that, and if interventions that are targeted that way would be helpful. The other kind of broad category is the comprehensive diagnostic assessment that all mental health professionals do at the beginning of therapy. And that gives us a really global picture of what's going on with the kid and what their needs are and what their strengths are. And sometimes we also do a CANS assessment as well that kind of piggybacks onto that. But it's, again, going back to those systems and the different pools that kids dip into, we're kind of seeing all these things. And whenever I'm doing an assessment with kids, I'm always asking about, what do you do for fun? Are you in any activities outside of school and home? Who are your friends? Tell me about your friends, those sorts of things. I'm also asking about the symptoms of depression, anxiety, stuff like that. But I think it's just as important that we know what is the kid's day-to-day life like? How are they spending their time? What are they doing? If we go and look at the research, we know that kids who have one good friend have better outcomes than kids that can't identify even one. Kids will sometimes say, well, I have these 2 friends, that's it. I'm like, that's cool if you can talk to them, right? So I really love all the conversations that are happening around belonging because I think if I'm looking at kids and the biggest problem facing them right now, I think it's isolation. And I think you have to consider so many different facets here, but social media use and how, you mentioned the sexting being a big thing. Kids are more and more on their devices and less the interpersonal connection. There's a time and a place for social media, but we still have to have those other things for kids, and we still have to help them find how they can access those things.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Victoria, I'm wondering if you can share a couple of your success stories. This is the feel good part where we get to share some of the successes, when we work with these learners.
Yeah, so I think success has a lot of different definitions, I think. And a lot of times the kids that we interact with, we don't know what happens after they leave our hour-long presentation, or we don't know what happens after that. But occasionally, we'll have a kiddo in one of our presentations, and we'll get a message or something from a parent online. And a lot of the messages that we get are just, thank you so much for opening the door to this conversation for my child to come home and talk to me about whatever it is that is going on. Or I didn't realize that there were other sports out there apart from what's offered just through the school district or just through the city. A lot of times kids have a lot of strengths and they don't know where to place those strengths. And so giving families resources and opportunities to find different ways for them to express those strengths, whether they're physical activities or drama or dance or any number, I mean, kayaking, walking by the water, whatever it might look like for them. But just giving parents opportunities to have those conversations with their kids to find out what their strengths are, what they're interested in.
Thank you. Todd, will you share a little bit more with us about the village? I think it's so new, and I know it's a huge passion for you, and I'm wondering if we can share more with our community about what that looks like, what's going to be shared within the village. Is it walk-in? Do they have to schedule an appointment?
So I'll start off by kind of telling you where we were at with the intake and diversion unit, and then what safety and assessment centers do, and about the transition and what we're working on, what we have available, how to exit, get in there. So
Take us on the journey.
I'll take you on the journey. So just a quick snapshot with the intake and diversion unit. We screen between 9 and 1,000 citations each year for juvenile court. During that time, we do a criminogenic risk assessment using the information from the police report, maybe past reports or histories, and then we'd sit down and talk with the parents briefly before court in hopes that we could do a diversion or prevention program to keep them from entering the system. We know evidence-based practices tell us that if we match low-risk, low-need kid in high-risk, high-need supervision, they're going to fail. And we know that if we stick a high-risk, high-need kid in low-risk supervision, they're going to fail. So the goal of the intake and diversion unit over the years is to match those risks and needs with the level of supervision and then provide the right services. So that would be done in about a 5 or 10 minute conversation with parents and kids prior to court. Over the years, we've diverted about 60% of the kids from court with about an 83-84% success rate. We had 5 or 6 different diversion programs. Some of them were like 98% successful. Others were about 75% successful. I think a lot depended on, we had kind of a self-report, kind of, I don't know what you'd say, skimming the easier cases off the top for a certain program, which is right. We're matching risk, low risk to low supervision, and then providing the resources that are needed. So 2 years ago, we had the opportunity to go to Tennessee to a conference, and Jack Martin from the Harbor in Las Vegas, he's the director for juvenile justice in Clark County, which is in Las Vegas, was presenting on assessment centers. And as we sat through and I say we, there was a juvenile prosecutor, a few health and welfare workers, and myself there, and then as well as some people from the Idaho Department of Juvenile Corrections. But as we sat through that conversation and discussion about what assessment centers do, we were thinking about kind of what we were doing in our county and how we could improve it. And the Idaho Department of Juvenile Corrections later came out with some funding for Safety and Assessment Center, so we applied for the grant and were able to get it. But the difference that we're doing now, so we're screening all the citations in our county the same way we were doing it before, but we're actually able to screen them before they get put on the court system. And we're actually, the assessment center, the village is designed, and if you've been in there, you know it's very calming when you go in there. A few of our staff were able to take on the job duties of creating a trauma-informed environment with the right colors, and it's benefiting the family. So we've upped our screening tools. We're using a juvenile inventory for functioning tool that's a self-report computerized program where kids can sit down in a trauma-informed room and feel comfortable, reporting. These screenings and assessments before they're taking about 5 minutes, and now we've been upwards of 2.5 hours. We're getting to the real. Before we'd know there's like some type of conduct disorder. Now we're able to target. It's trauma related. It's related to anxiety or depression. We're really able to trim out the fat and know what the challenge is, and work with the parents. So we're doing screening and assessments, and we have a University of Utah has a psychiatric residency program through Idaho State University, and we've been able to have a psychiatrist in our office for a half day on Mondays. Right now, there's gaps in the system where it could take months and months to get in to see a psychiatrist. And so these families that are in those crisis situations, when they come in for their screenings, if it's on a Monday, a lot of times we can slide them right in, talk to them. He can provide us with recommendations for treatment, and then we're able to move on that. But really, what the assessment center's done, it's taken our intake and diversion unit out of the court system, and we're able to do screening and assessments, and then provide work with community members. We're not a provider of services. We're reaching out to local providers to provide those services in a timely manner. We're going to work with the targeted care coordinators to do case management for the walk-ins. So we do have you can walk in, you can call, schedule an appointment. The school, we're working on a policy and procedures right now for referrals from the school district. I'd really like to see us be able to, rather than write citations, work to get these services and things put in place for these families and kids before they're at that point where they're getting citations. So we're really focusing on the prevention and intervention. We're also teaming up. Bannock Youth Foundation is coming in. They're going to be teaching the Making Sense of Your Worth class, which I think will really benefit a lot of those kids that are scoring high on the assessments for anxiety and trauma. And so we're excited to have them. We have the health department that's teaching an in-depth tobacco class. Judge Call mentioned that we're having a lot of kids that are cited for tobacco. I think we saw 173 cases last year. And so the health department's coming in. They're doing a 4-session in-depth class for those kids. And then they're going to provide the Not On Tobacco, which is a tobacco cessation program. If the kid realizes hey, this isn't healthy and I need some help quitting. So we'll have that. We teach a substance abuse education program through funding through the Office of Drug Policy. It's called Families in Action. And it's awesome because it's evidence-based. It has a parent portion and a youth section. So there's a facilitator for the adults and the kids, and they learn about the healthy relationships with their children and with their parents. You get into the different parenting styles, what an active parent looks like, how to do that. They get into iMessages, and then they do learn quite a bit about, the different drawbacks of substance use, tobacco use. Gets into safe internet use, all that. Gets into setting goals. Trying to think what other programs we have right now that are available. But yeah, that's kind of what's going on at the village.
Can I say a little bit more about the village? This is a tool. So I got to say, I came over here from Power County. I was a prosecuting attorney in Power County before I was hired over here to do this job. And the judge out there is Judge Paul Lagas, and he spoke at the opening for the assessment center for the village. And he talked to me about this too. He was really, really excited about it because prior to being a judge in Power County, he was a prosecutor. He's been doing justice-related issues and juvenile and family-related issues for 30 years, probably something like that, here in Southeast Idaho. And I think he said this to Todd too. He said it to me at least. But this is something he's been dreaming about since he started doing this. A place where he can send a family and they can receive all kinds of services in one place to assist them and identify their needs. And the village they don't, like Todd said, they don't provide the services. They don't do the fixing, I guess we'll say, for lack of a better term. They identify what the family's needs are. And as a judge, that is invaluable to me because I can only make good decisions if I have good information. And that information that they gather in the village helps identify what does this kid need, what does this family need, and then helps point them in the direction. And then they're building connections with our community providers in order to point those kids and those families quickly into those services, because that's one of the other issues that we struggle with, is a delay between identifying the service the kid or the family needs and then getting them into that service. And so building those connections helps build pathways for those kids and families that need this most to be able to get into those services as quickly as possible so they're receiving them. So it's been a huge benefit. It hasn't been open that long. We had sort of a soft opening in July and just had the grand opening. When was that?
So August 8th was the ribbon
August 8th,
cutting.
the ribbon cutting.
Ribbon
Thank you.
cutting. I was looking at our statistics the other day. Well, we don't really have statistics yet, but we have served 70 families have come through since, started, probably second week in July. And so we are trucking along. There's a lot of things that are still in the implementation process. We're trying to get things ironed out, but I've already had some really awesome stories where families have come in and been connected to services and really quick and seen a benefit within a couple weeks. One of the things I was going to say, that single point of contact is so important because at juvenile justice, the intake and diversion unit was becoming kind of a point of contact for help. So we would have people coming in the front door, not with a citation, just looking for help. And I would sit down and go through the screening tools we had and then hand them a stack of papers, 5 or 6 papers of, and make phone calls with them and say, all right, here's the 6 places you need to go and things you need to do to get connected to services. But with what we're doing now, we're getting that all put in place in a matter of 1 or 2 appointments with families.
Thank you. Amy, what are you seeing on the school district level, and how are we using the village right now?
So I didn't know we were working on a plan. I referred a family there last week without a citation, and I just texted Todd and said, hey, I have somebody that could use your help before we get to that point of needing a citation. So we've already referred people to you, whether we're supposed to or not.
No, you send them.
I know. You said it was okay, so I did. So, but that's good to hear that we're working on a formal plan because then it means that more schools will know how to utilize the services. And I think probably just our working relationship made it super easy for me to pick up the phone, but a process in place would be good for other administrators to know how to use that because it's a great prevention program. And they have tons of service. They have tons of institutional knowledge. Let me tell you, institutional knowledge about.
I've learned how to navigate the system through calling people. So.
Well, I always tell parents, like, I can do what I can do, and then, like, I love talking to your kid, and I love working with them, but at some point, if I realize they need the help of a professional counselor, I'm going to refer them to my counselor. And so sometimes when I see that they have other needs outside of school, like, I would love to help them with them, but I also need to refer them to somebody that I know can give them their best and has all of those resources and that knowledge base for, the vaping stuff or the violent, the more violent crimes. And it's a great resource for our community to have. So I was super excited when Todd wrote and got the grant.
I think this would be a great time if there's questions about the village or anything that we've covered up to this point to open up for some questions. Any thoughts or questions? That means we're doing a really good job explaining that this is going well right now. Perfect. So if we kind of flip the script a little bit and talk, Kyle, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more, and Kendra, about the services that then we are referring out to and what is available for our families and our youth in our community.
Good question. So I mentioned there are a lot of changes happening. In the next year, our goal is to implement the new Idaho Behavioral Health Plan. You may have seen some things about that in the news. But really, we have a system of care that's under-resourced, and we don't have a lot of diversity on what treatment options are available, especially in rural communities and in some parts of southeastern Idaho. It's really hard to find treatment that you need. But in the next year, there will be a lot of changes to that, and hopefully some good things coming. Specifically regarding the CANs that I work with, it's intended to be a communication tool where we can get people that are working with a child on the same team with what's going on and what the needs are and what strengths exist and how we can all best support that family. But right now, it's really locked down, and so it ends up that families just repeat their story over and over, and nobody actually communicates, and that's the exact opposite of what we're trying to accomplish. So next year, we'll have a much better version of our platform that will allow school personnel or juvenile justice or others to have access to that communication tool if the family gives consent. Obviously, it's their choice who they want to share things with, but the whole idea is that we can all work together. Care coordination is kind of the process, the term, but we need that for youth and families. Like 50 minutes of counseling, if all we have is a hammer and everything's a nail, like that's not great. We need a lot more services that are tailored to the youth that we see. And so I'm really excited to work with the village and all the other resources that have opened and are coming, because we'll have a much more comprehensive system that actually can meet kids' needs without sending them to residential in another state. Like right now, statewide, we have over 100 kids that are in care outside of Idaho, and that's just not acceptable. Like, kids need to be in their community, and they need to be treated here where they are, where they can be with their family and friends. So those are some of the things that we're working on, but I'll let Kendra share her thoughts too.
I might have a hammer though. But I might have a ball peen hammer. I might have a mallet. We've exhausted my understanding of hammers though, so that's all. But what I do and what we tend to do in our outpatient settings is the more traditional kind of come in for therapy and leave. But I like to think that we look outside of that, right? So we know there's other services available. I'm really glad to have the village as well as like a one-stop shop for some of these things, because before I was trying to track down like where to get the tobacco cessation and where to get like wraparound services if we could. And so being able to figure that out at once will be hugely helpful. From my perspective, what I do a lot is bring in kids, bring in families, and we've identified their needs, we've identified their strengths, and we figure out how to use their strengths to best address their needs, right? So we say, okay, you're experiencing a lot of depression right now, and then you're acting out and it's coming out in aggression, right? It's an aggressive act that you're doing. Okay, you really like drawing, let's say, right? What can we do with this skill that you have? Can we use this to say, all right, you're going to draw your feelings now? Or can we get you in an art class? Or how can we build upon that to reduce these kind of negative symptoms that we're seeing, right? So it's a hammer, but we do what we can with it. And then we connect to the other things too. I appreciate that you kind of talked about how there's some limited resources available. I know that we had, for a while, a lot of trouble finding targeted care coordinators, and I think that's opened up some, so that's nice. We know there's CBRS in the community for some kids to get, and so that's community-based rehabilitative services. And so we make referrals to these when we think they would be most helpful to kids. I also like to think more broadly, too. The kids that I end up seeing are the ones that are kind of on the top of the pyramid where they've had significant needs show up. I like to think about kids that are at risk or kids in general and what we can do for those kids. And some of the stuff we've been talking about already is what those kids need, too, who aren't at risk of entering the system or at risk of developing severe anxiety. Kids in general need to have these connections that we've already talked about, right? They need to have those meaningful friendships and relationships. They need to have adults that they can depend on. So I want to keep that in mind as we're talking about all these different kind of interventions and things we can do, that it's not just the kids that immediately come to mind that need it. I think it's every kid that needs it.
Can you talk a little bit more about what you do with the family system?
Yeah, so certainly when I first meet with a kid, I always have their parent with them to get some collateral information. Even if the kid's an older teenager, I want to see what's going on in the dynamic between the parent and the child. The younger the kids are, the more active the parents tend to be in the therapy, and part of that is just the different therapeutic modalities that have an evidence base behind them and what those look like. We involve the parent as much as is needed and other members of the family as much as is needed to best help that family unit, right? For young kids, we have some services we do that's parent management training. And so this is working on those disruptive behaviors, the acting out behaviors for young kids. And we really involve the parents in that just as much as the kid, because that's a really dyadic relationship. And we teach the kid how to respond differently and the parent how to present information differently and respond differently as well. I think, like I said, as kids get older to teenagers, I have some teenagers who drive themselves, show up, do counseling, go home. And for some of them, that's fine. For some of them, that's totally fine. For others, I say, we really need to get mom or dad in here so we can talk about what's going on as a unit at home and work on I statements, communication skills, some of those things that have already been mentioned.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So one of the big changes that's happening right now is my team is a part of a center of excellence. It's a really presumptuous name that we've branded ourselves with. But the goal of that center of excellence is to bring those evidence-based practices and provide training to providers, because it can be really cost prohibitive for providers to get trained on some of these different evidence-based practices like PCIT, which stands for Parent-Child Interaction Therapy. Not everybody's lucky enough to see Dr. Westerhouse and get a really well-trained clinician, but we want more of those types of clinicians and services available in the community. And so we're gonna bring those and hopefully remove some of the barriers. And I did just wanna mention one thing that we learned from COVID is that telehealth can be really effective. I would prefer all day, every day that kids see an in-person therapist. But if we can't find anybody in the community, there is a great online-only provider called Charlie Health, and they do a lot of specific groups for different things. And so technology can open doors that maybe were closed in the past or that we didn't consider as much as we should. So.
There's started to be that trend for counselors across state lines to be able to provide services so that we can. It is good to get what we need here in town. Where they're connected and feel like they have that sense of belonging. But yeah, there are some of those options outside as well. If we kind of circle back to you, Victoria, I'm wondering if you can talk as a mental health advocate about some of the committees and subcommittees you're a part of. And then, the second part to that would be, what is your number one concern that you are seeing and how can we as a community help you?
So first part of that question, I'm on the District 6 Behavioral Health Board, and thanks to my good friend Tanya Wilkes over here, I'm now the chair of that board. Thank you so much for that. As of yesterday, it's brand new. But prior to that, I have been on the Children's Mental Health Subcommittee, and I was the chair of that subcommittee. For a variety of reasons, I'm a mother of 4. I have seen my boys. My oldest now is 21, and I've seen my youngest is 12. Just how much life has changed, and how difficult some situations and things have gotten for kids, and how we have to really get creative and really think outside of the box when we're coming up with solutions for these hard problems. And then you said my number one concern, right? I really think it is people start looking for resources and start looking for help when they're in crisis. And when you're in crisis, that's a real tough time to be making rational, logical decisions because we're in survival mode at that point. And a lot of times when we're in that crisis and that survival mode, it's even more difficult to find those resources that pair with the needs that we have. And so that is, in itself is a really complicated issue. But I think that not one solution is going to solve it. But I think that being proactive in our mental health and in our children's mental health is a really good start. I think starting conversations and starting to, nobody goes from zero to crisis. There's always steps in between, and identifying those steps before we reach crisis point, I think, is really important. And looking for those resources. If we have a child that, or our own child or a friend's child or whoever that we're noticing some changes in behavior, or we're noticing some things that could be a cause for concern, starting the conversation of looking for those resources then, instead of when it's, at that really crucial crisis moment.
Thank you. Todd, I saw you raise.
Well, Victoria hit a point that, since July 15th, we've been using a different assessment tool. And I think it's been a real eye-opener to me after the youth gets done taking that initial screening tool, to sit down with the parents and say, hey, look, are you aware that your son or daughter scored a 7 out of 8 on the self-harm category? And they don't know that. And so I think what Victoria is saying is so important. Like, as parents, like, we're all parents. I'm a parent as well, and I can communicate better with my kids and know what's going on. But I think as a whole, we've got to get the word out there that there's a lot of youth struggling right now, and those parents that are with them every day don't know how bad they're struggling, and that's something that, like, as I started looking at these screening tool results, I'm like, oh my gosh, and we've got to have these conversations with parents, and it's shocking to them. So.
Well, and I think sometimes as parents, can be tough to have that difficult conversation because nobody wants to hear from their child that they're thinking of harming themselves. We don't want to hear that. But we also don't want to be on the other end of a 911 call either. So I think encouraging parents and encouraging people that work with youth to ask the hard questions, it lets them know that somebody's paying attention. Sometimes it's isolating life can be very isolating, and problems can seem very overwhelming, especially to kids who have such limited life experience. And they can feel very alone in their problems, but just having somebody show up for them and just have somebody asking, are you okay? Just that check-in can mean so much. And a lot of times we don't, because we're scared we're going to make it worse. We're scared we're going to push our children away. We're scared of 100 different things. But I would much rather take the risk of saving my child's life than letting those words go unsaid.
I think that is very powerful to talk about the proactive approaches that we can take. A lot of times we get stuck in the reaction and in the crisis mode. But I think with the village and with some of the assessments that we're using, we're able to quickly figure out what's going on with the kiddo, dig deep into the root causes, and then be able to work with them to support. So hopefully we don't get to that crisis mode. Judge Call, you said you lost your name a year ago.
I did.
Became judge.
My first name, anyway.
Your first name. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what your thoughts and perceptions have been in this first year, and the things that are going well and the places you'd like to see us go as a community with our learners.
It's been an experience getting to do this, and I'm really grateful I've had the opportunity to be part of this system. I've said, I think ever since I jumped into the middle of this, that I got to just walk into a system that was already functioning at a very, very high level, just like Kyle talked about, coming back here from another area and seeing what was going on here. And we had great things going on in Power County while we were there as well, and that continue to happen there too. But just being part of this type of cooperation and having this many people that are so interested in helping children and families has been really there's so many things that we do very well at, and I hate not focusing on too many of those. The Village is a great place to point our attention to of things that we're doing, things that individual community providers are doing to try to improve their services, provide additional services for kids and families in our communities, and really just the cooperation that we see. Judge Murray had started years ago a group, it's a community prevention meeting is what it's called, that we have once a month, where we have members of different organizations in the community that have kids and families in mind come together and talk about how things are going and what's working well and areas we need help in. And I think that's really one of the biggest strengths, and it's kind of what Kyle indicated earlier, is that we just come together and we find solutions to try to help our kids and our families. And Kyle talked about using evidence-based practices, and I don't know if everybody knows what that is, but my understanding of it, and I don't have the right letters behind my name to really totally explain what that is probably, but it's programs and processes that have been vetted and tested, and the data has been collected on to demonstrate that they have actual effectiveness when we utilize those programs. And this community has been great at trying to identify those things and implement them. And there's room to improve, room to identify and fix the gap between identifying the need for services and the time it takes to get kids and families into services is something that I'd like to see us work as a community towards improving. We have great tools for assessment through the Village and through other opportunities and programs that we have. Some of it is simply a lack of the number or volume of providers in the community to be able to see everybody that we need to be able to get services to. And I think another thing coupled with this, when I started working in juvenile justice a long time ago now, I started hearing some things about these things called ACEs. For those of you that don't know what ACEs are, it stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it was really fascinating to me when I started to learn about ACEs. It's just some folks started identifying that people who, and particularly as children, had certain adverse experiences tended to have worse outcomes in life, particularly health outcomes. Some doctors had identified this. And I thought it was really interesting that there was this correlation and connection, and helpful for me in my prior job as a prosecutor and now as a judge to identify that. Well, I'll say it this way. I don't interact with a lot of bad people in my job, what I do, people who want to do bad things. I interact with a lot of people who've suffered a lot of trauma in their lives, who deal with things like addiction and mental illness, and struggle to find the right solutions for how to deal with that. And so ACEs kind of helped me to have that perspective of understanding there's things that have happened in people's lives that lead them to where they're at. It started to get kind of discouraging for me for a little while when I started hearing a lot of people talking about ACEs and how kids have these bad things happen to them, and then there's bad outcomes and no next step of what happens after that. Well, we know that there's these bad issues, these bad problems. We don't know what the next step is to help these kids and these families. But I think we are starting to recognize what those next steps are. I think Kyle's talked a bit about this in developing strengths of kids, his passion, his soapbox that he got on for a little bit, talking about some of the things that they're working on. But that has really been beneficial for me in my profession to recognize just because bad things have happened to kids or families doesn't mean that they are destined to have bad outcomes. And so for me, one of the things that I'm working to try to do, and I think we as a community are working to try to do, and all recognizing and realizing, is when we identify these children that have been exposed to these adverse experiences, what do we do to help them? We talk about it in the juvenile justice system is about creating resilience in kids, developing strengths, and helping them to improve those things. One of the things that I see a lot, and I'm really grateful for this kind community movement organization and the message that's trying to be brought from this. One of the things that I see kids struggle the most with, and I try to talk to them about this a little bit in court. They're not always the most open about it, and that's fine. I tell them it's okay. They don't have to talk about all their trauma in open court. But I try to ask them when they've done something wrong and I get to their sentencing, we call it a disposition, I ask them, why did you do this? And a lot of times they kind of shrug their shoulders and look down. I don't know. I just did it. And I don't know. A friend was doing something, so I followed along. Or I don't know. I was feeling kind of down that day, so I thought using some marijuana would help me feel better. Or that person was picking on me and they made me mad, so I decided to hit them. There's all these kinds of things, but a lot of it comes down to, what the kids end up ultimately saying a lot of times, and I'm kind of getting sick of hearing this word, is, well, they're bullying me. I don't like that word for a couple of reasons. I think that it frustrates me because on the one hand, I hear what they have to say, and I hear what they're saying. We all dealt with it. We all dealt with difficult people as kids that we didn't like and that we didn't get along with, or that made our lives complicated and not fun, made us not want to go to school or that kind of thing, or at least most of us did if you're normal like me. At least I think I'm normal. We dealt with that kind of thing. We had conflict and troubles. And so on the one hand, kids refer back to bullying as something that is out of their control. Well, there's nothing I can do about it because I'm being bullied. So I'm not going to go to school. So I'm going to use drugs. I'm going to get in fights because of what's happening. And they kind of lose control of their lives. They give it over to somebody else. And I try to talk to the kids about that and help them understand that a little bit. I have about probably 30 seconds of talking to them where they actually listen to me, and then they kind of zone out after that. So sometimes I talk too much to the kids and need to shorten it up. But that's something that I think has been really important for me to try to help them understand, is that through the rest of your life, not just as a kid, there's only one person in this world who you'll be able to control, and it's yourself. You can't make anybody else do anything. You can ask people to do things, you can communicate with people, but you're never going to be able to force anybody to do anything. And I tell them, as a judge, I can't force anybody to do anything. I can't make you follow your probation conditions. If you don't follow them, I'll stick you in detention and punish you for it, but I can't make you do it. You have to decide that you want to do it. And that's something that I like about this kind community and this emphasis on, it's not about not doing something, it's about doing something. It's about being kind. It's about finding that kindness. And that's what I hear us as a panel talking about that's so successful with our kids. When they find that belonging, it's because they've been shown kindness. And then they in turn find ways of sharing that kindness with other people. And that's something that's been so beneficial, and I'd like to continue to help working on, and something that I talk to these kids about. You can't make the bullies stop. You can control what you can do, and you can try to help make your school a better place. You can try to help make your life better and take control of your life back. And I think that's empowering to kids, and I think it helps them with dealing with adverse experiences to develop resilience and strength in facing those challenges and those difficulties. So that's something I'm grateful for the team of people I get to work with, both directly through juvenile justice, through the law enforcement partners we have, the school district partners we have, our community providers, children's mental health, our Department of Health and Welfare, our nonprofit organizations that go around in our community and do everything that they can to help our kids and families. And I hope we get to keep doing those kinds of things.
Thank you. I know that's something that you're very passionate about. I'm wondering if anybody else wants to share or touch on what he's talked about. They're like, oh, shoot. Nope. So I feel very
Yeah,
there
I
we
will.
go.
Okay. Absolutely. With all the things you're saying, and as I hear the bullying, I think about how kids use language, right? And so there's lots of words I hear now, like toxic and trauma and bully and things like that. And I like to think of it as like different layers, right? Because there are some kids who are kind of mercilessly bullied, and something's got to happen for those kids too that involves other people. And I think about the research onto bystanders too, right? And so one thing we can do is we can tell every kid, like, you can be the help too, right? We know that bystanders plays a huge role in bullying, because if people just kind of passively accept it, who are there, it kind of reinforces the bullying behavior. So that's something too, as we talk to kids about their own bullying, we can say, and you can stick up for other people in a similar situation, right? I think fostering resilience is a great thing to do. As we talk about ACEs, I was thinking about that earlier in the conversation, so I'm glad you brought it up. Kids aren't doomed to these negative outcomes if they've experienced these things, but we need to acknowledge that they've been through them, and that adds another layer to their life. And then we can kind of guide them in a direction and give them tools to enhance their strengths to help with better outcomes in the future. So, just a couple thoughts that came up as you were talking. Yeah.
I'm going to say something.
If I
That-
pause well, then somebody else
Somebody will
jumps in.
jump
I'm
in.
learning. I'm learning.
I've told lots of people I always have something to say. That's one of the things that's so helpful for me as a judge, and what I was trying to articulate earlier is that having this community of people around who has the expertise of how to help kids through these challenging circumstances, help families through these challenging circumstances, is really what makes a huge difference, and I think has helped us to have some really positive outcomes for our families. And that we can continue to do that, I think, is really important.
Just keep the silence going. No. Isn't it great when we have a judge who can explain what trauma-informed care is and evidence-based practices? You nailed the evidence-based practices definition. Nice job.
I'm glad I didn't embarrass myself.
No, you did good. So I have a frequency table of the most common actionable items. So we refer to those as strengths that need help being developed and needs that exist. So this is statewide for like 16,000 kids that are involved in treatment. And the number one most common thing that they need help with is developing the strength of coping and savoring. That's the most common thing by far. And right next to it is the need of emotional and physical regulation, which it makes sense. Those go hand in hand, right? If you have that strength, you probably have the ability to regulate your emotions well. But we really need to teach kids that there are skills that they can learn, deep breathing. Like there's so many things that they can learn that are going to help them because life is hard. Like they're going to go through challenges. Like nobody's life is easy. That's not part of the human condition. So there's going to be challenges, and the more we can prepare them to get through those challenges, the better prepared they're going to be when it comes. And so that whole internal, external locus of control concept that the judge was describing, like we need to help kids feel internally that they have power in their life. And sometimes that's really hard when they've experienced trauma and all their life has taught them is that bad things happen to them that are out of their control. But as much as possible, we need to help them feel like there are things that they can control. And so I appreciate the kind community concept because life is hard, and the more we can get kids and people to reach out and build that interpersonal skill, the interpersonal strength, they're going to be able to ask for help when they need it because everybody does at some point in their life. And I think that's a pretty awesome thing that we're developing with mental health stigma going away. Like it's okay to ask for help. You can call 988. You can see a counselor. And I think our youth are actually a lot more open to that than we are. So that's pretty exciting.
Something I wanted to add to that is one of the things I've seen be really successful with the kids is when they can find some type of supportive adult role model that can help them. So a lot of times kids traditionally find that role somewhere in the school system because they spend so much time in the schools. And kids continue to do that today. But there's a lot of other programs out there designed to help provide those things for kids. There's organizations out there, nonprofits, that are trying to provide those services for our kids. And I think we as community members, when we look around at what needs to happen, those are some of the things that kids need most. Some of the things that I see lacking that we need more of always. We have and this is more tying in now to my child protection work, but we have what's called a guardian ad litem that's appointed in every child protection case for the families, for the kids. The job of a guardian ad litem is to watch over those kids and to report back to the court about how the kids are doing, how the family is doing, if the parents are complying, if the kids are safe. And they don't represent anybody. They don't work for the state. They don't work for the defense. They don't work for the parents. They're just there as an adult, a responsible person who can look at this objectively and say, hey, judge, here's some stuff I observed, and this is of concern. You should know about it. And that's a volunteer program. The CASA program is who provides our guardian ad litem. I got a couple of them sitting in here today. They provide that service to me of helping me know, and really it's a service to our kids and our families of helping them know what they need. So we're always looking for help with that program, volunteers to help in it, people to assist with that program. And there's lots of other programs designed to assist kids and families in this way here in our community that could be beneficial. And if people are looking for something to do to try to help with this, these kids need people. They need role models. Foster parents are another thing that we're sorely lacking. We have in the state of Idaho, we don't have to use it too often out of Bannock County, but we have some Airbnbs the Department of Health and Welfare has had to rent where children who are placed in the legal custody of the Department of Health and Welfare have to go sometimes because we can't find foster families for those kids to have a home to be in. it's a really challenging thing for people to do, a hard thing for people to do, and it's not right for everybody at every stage of their life. But it's another way where people can provide that role model. I had a case just today, again, everyone will remain nameless, with a kid who's been in foster care, who is no longer, he's in the legal custody of the Department of Health and Welfare, but not in foster care. His former foster parent showed up for his juvenile court hearing today. Didn't have to. They got lots of other things they could be doing, but they're trying to help provide that role, that connection, that community. So those are some things that we can do to help add to that, is providing those role models.
I think it's important to just give a shout out to CASA, because I've got a kid that's in a treatment program outside the state, and I'll tell you, his worker drives down, takes him gift baskets, checks in. She almost makes me feel like I don't do my job, because she's always outdoing me, and I think they just need a shout out. So thank you, CASA workers.
And I think that's a perfect segue into where we can head. I am so fortunate to be in a district that is so collaborative with everybody in our community, where our focus is how do we best help each learner. And I'm wondering, I can only imagine, and I have friends that say, well, what can I do to help? I'm not a counselor. I'm just a mom, or I'm just a dad, or I help coach, but what else can I do? And I'm wondering if the panel can share some ideas. We did, CASA workers, foster care. What are some other ideas that there are for community members to be able to feel like that they're putting back into our learners in our community?
When you talk about people with limited time, people who are parents, who are coaches, who are things like that, that already maybe are stretched thin, but they still want to be helpful, I think showing up, right, and listening, like those are the two things. And then you never know who's going to be the adult in that kid's life that has that huge effect on them. Those two things, though, are critical for it. So just, if there's someone who, if your kid's on a team and their parent's not there, maybe you bring them something too, right? Or if a kid starts talking, you put your phone down and listen, like those things. Those are huge. And I think anybody has the ability to do that, the capacity to do that.
Thank you.
Well, on that note too, you talk about the sports teams, and I've had kids in sports for years, and as I work with the families, there's not that financial ability. So, find a sports team, donate, sponsor a few athletes, a few kids that are looking to join a team, because I don't feel like there's an opportunity due to some of the financial barriers that these families are up against. But I've had a few community members come up and ask if they can sponsor a kid in different sporting things, and it's super helpful. We had a kid in cross country several years ago, and community members got her fees paid and got her the shoes she needed, and it was all the difference in the world for that kid.
Yeah, and I would just reiterate what you said, just to show up. I think that's most of the battle a lot of times, is just showing up. I think when we have these big conversations about these really big topics, it can feel very overwhelming, and we all have limited resources. We all have limited time. We all have a limited bandwidth of what we can do. And we can't do it all, but everybody can do something. And starting somewhere and choosing to help where you're at and help kids and other people where they're at. I always recommend that people reach out to Southeastern Idaho Public Health to take suicide awareness and prevention courses. They're QPR courses. They're 1 hour long. They're free of charge. A lot of times they're online. There are lots of things that we can do, and there's people that need help in a way that only we can give. I think sometimes we shortchange ourselves because we don't have the right letters behind our name, or we don't feel like we belong in a group because we're just a mom, or we're just out here doing our best. But our best is enough, because everybody can show up, and everybody can listen, and everybody can give encouragement, and everybody can just lift where you stand.
Amy, how do you see the community push into our school districts and help and support?
Todd really wanted to answer that question. So we have parent volunteers at all levels in our schools. We have parents participating in activities at the school. I know the elementary schools have, somebody elementary is gonna have to tell me here, like, that's had a little kid recently, like bagels with, no, it's donuts and dads.
Donuts with dads.
Donuts with grown-ups. I like that because that doesn't assume that it's a mom or dad, right? We have so many caregivers now that are grandparents or aunts or uncles. Like I was just thinking of, the stand up and do something. I have families at my school that have taken in other kids because they haven't had a place to stay or haven't had, stable. I have kids that couch surf. And so just the adults in their lives, whoever it is, whether it's a friend's parent or whatever, we have a lot of adults that are helping meet our kids' basic needs too. In the community, which says a lot about our community. But academic volunteering, coaching, sports, just showing up, right? All of those kinds of things help. We also work a lot with guardian ad litems too. They'll come in and they're great advocates for the kids. And so if you do have an opportunity to, and you have a lot of time, because that takes some time. It's a great program and it's really
Don't talk
successful.
him out of it.
I'm not.
Not a lot of time. It's just a little. It's
Right,
a little
it's-
bit of
No,
really
she's-
well.
It's an hour commitment a
She's
week.
right.
It's not like
It's-
coming in and volunteering at the reading center
It's something
with
that takes
kindergartners.
commitment.
But it's a tremendous program and it's kid focused and strength based and it helps our community a lot.
I can speak from, I got to be with the YDC, the Youth Development Center, for a while, and we did a lot of positive exploration outside of the classroom to try to help them build new skills and new experiences that hopefully they would carry into their life. And we would take them to gyms, and gyms opened up for us. We got to volunteer at the food bank and just a lot of community partnerships with businesses that were willing to take our kiddos in and show them the ropes and give them new skills and experiences so that, when they needed those memories and they needed to pull something positive, they could do that. Borrowing mountain bikes and taking them to a place they've never been, going on hikes and walks in places that they wouldn't have chosen to go on their own or had the ability to. And so I think that some of those things were really helpful for us when I was a part of the YDC program.
If I can just add a little bit to that, I've seen that be really helpful for a lot of the kids I work with who don't have financial means to do things, where some of these gyms have opened up opportunities for those kids to participate in those pro-social activities. There's other programs in the community. One that comes to mind is the Sixes Creative Institute. It's an art institute that's been put together to get kids who like art to come and have a positive outlet for that. There's music programs. There's martial arts organizations, dojos. I think there's even a fencing club in Pocatello. I want to do that someday. I don't have time for it, but I'm just, that'd be fun. But there's all kinds of things, and I think wherever you can find your passion and the things that you like, if you can find a way to open that up to the kids and families in our community, that's really one way that you'll find you'll get to do something you like to do, and you'll get to share that with other people who are looking for an opportunity to be part of something. So I think that's important. And one of the great things that we have now with the technology that can be very challenging for our kids too, is it's a lot easier to get information about things out into the community now through social media and through other things like that, to have some kind of advertising and ways of getting information out about programs and initiatives. And so finding ways to help just get information out. If that's all you do as part of something, that's great. You're going to help a bunch of people if you can share that information. So those are some things that came to my mind.
Thank you.
So I think a lot of great ideas on how to help kids have been shared, but that one caring adult concept is really what the research shows around resilience and trauma. And I think wherever you interact with kids, try and learn their names. If it's your neighbor's kids, if it's the kids at church, just try and learn their names and greet them by name and ask them how they're doing. I think of the great lady who is at the school bus drop off in the mornings at Syringa Elementary, and she doesn't volunteer there anymore, but she knew every kid's name, like the entire school. And she would say hi, she'd greet them by name and ask them how they were doing with a smile. And like, she made such a difference. Even just me as the parent that sometimes drop off my kids, like I got excited to see her in the mornings just because she was so happy and she just made a difference. So So wherever it is that you interact with kids, try and learn their names and ask them how they're doing. That's the show up. Like, just do what you can. It might not seem like much, but it does make a difference.
We're about to wrap up tonight. I want to give each of our panel members a chance to share anything else. I know Kendra brought bullet points. She really dug deep for this. So I'll give each of them a chance if there's anything else that they want to share. You know, tonight we've talked about, I think the overarching theme has been collaboration within our community, within all of the different systems that are here to help our learners to be successful and to feel safe within our community and within our schools, within the judicial system. We talked about belonging and how really what we're seeing when it comes down to it, and we're using all of these fancy evidence-based assessments and modalities to help these students, is they need to belong and they need to feel that they have a sense of purpose within each of their different settings. And then we've talked about how we can help as a community and you know, wrap these kids in love, show the kindness, and show them that they do belong and that we do want them here with us. So as we wrap up tonight, you know, if there's anything that you would like to share, your last pieces and words of wisdom, your bullet points, this would be a wonderful time. Yeah.
I start introductions. No, I would just say, I think I said everything I wanted to, but thank you for what you do. We have an amazing community. I love being a part of it, and it's hard to know sometimes. You don't get to see the outcome of our efforts, especially in mental health. I don't get to know what happened with the kids I was working with. Normally, if I do know, it's because it didn't turn out well. But you do make a difference. Like, every effort you make, no matter how small, it matters, and I'm grateful to be a part of our community.
I feel like this is peak psychologist thing to do too, is to like bring out the stuff. But I think I hit on most of the bullet points that were important, so I probably didn't even need it, as it turns out. But yeah, just don't be afraid to reach out to kids if you think that they look like they're struggling. Don't be afraid to ask the difficult questions. You might be the only one who asks it, and they're waiting for that, right? So don't be afraid to ask, and just, like I said, show up.
I think probably I just want to thank everybody because we have an amazing community, and it takes the families and the kids and all of us working together for that to happen. And I think that's one of our strengths, and I think in return that helps our kids tremendously and our families that are struggling.
That's an amazing segue. Amazing.
There's a story behind that, but we don't have time. So I think from my experience over the last 2 years with this village project, that's the one thing. And I knew this. I've been part of juvenile justice since December. I looked this up the other day because I didn't believe it, but December 1994. And I do know that we have, did you do the math?
1900.
Yeah. Yeah.
Imagine.
It's a miracle I'm still alive. But as I've worked in this community for so many years, we do have, and I'm being honest, like the best community, the best collaborations. Everybody here is awesome. But as I ventured this journey the last 2 years, I thought I knew everything that was available in the community for kids, and there's been all kinds of things come out of the woodwork that I had no idea. And so I say we keep working together. We keep learning what our neighbors are doing, what, so and so, like ask questions. Let's continue to build these connections, build our community, and even better what we already have. I mean, I think like there's problems. We know that, but I think from a coming together aspect, we are one of the stronger, and I know this because I talk to other counties, POs throughout Idaho, and we have a lot better connections and work together, and it's attributed to everybody here and in the community. So just keep working forward, and thanks.
I think I've said most of what I want to, and can just echo what everybody sitting here who's spoken before me has already said, and the thing that's inspiring to me about getting to participate in something like this is seeing people who want to make a positive difference. seeing people who want to make our community a better place for our kids, because we can all, this is one of the challenges of technology, again, I think that we all face, is we can all open up our phones, jump to the news site that we like to look at, and find a parade of horribles of things that are happening in our world that make us so we can't sleep at night and give us heartburn and anxiety and all the things. But when we choose to stand up and do something positive to make our community a kind place, to do something about it, that's what makes the difference. That's what makes this work, and what everybody here has been talking about is when we stand up and do something about it. And like Victoria was saying, we can't do everything, but we can do something. And so finding what that thing is that we can do is what makes all the difference. So thanks for letting me participate today.
I guess that's what I get for making you go first, is now I have to go last. I guess just kind of my final thoughts about everything is just remembering the value and importance of hope, and what a wonderful, wonderful opportunity that we have as adults to help instill that in our kids. Because they're our future, and we have amazing youth. We have some of the strongest, this is without question the strongest generation I think that the world has ever seen. We've given them and are handing over a pretty tough world for them to live in, and they get up every day and they do it anyway. And so just loving our kids where they're at and accepting them for what they have to offer, and reminding them every day that there's hope, and that life will be hard, but it won't always be hard all of the time. So just remembering hope.
Thank you. I'd like to thank our panel, thank the community for coming together for this kind conversation tonight, and I hope that you have a wonderful night.